to not put up any PII during recordings so that we don't have to do any editing of content.
Good plan.
Yeah. Okay, so good afternoon, and thanks everyone for joining. My name's Mike O'Shea, and I've got Ben's on here as well. And we've got a special guest today, and if you've sort of been looking at the comment that I've got above Adam's name around providing much lacking balance, and what I mean by that is, well, first of all, Stephen's not here, so that's why we've got him crossed out. He still exists, he just isn't here with us right now. He's not a ghost or anything like that. But a lot of the time you'll find that, I think it's fair to say that Steve, Ben, and I will probably just say, dump it and move it to the cloud, or, you know, why haven't you done these things? Whereas Adam works, I think I'm allowed to say you work for a law firm, and that means that you know that you've got people that you can't be too disruptive with. So that's why I thought you'd be a good point of balance for some of the talking points we've got in here. But if you just want to sort of do a quick intro, if there's anything else you want people to know.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, thanks. Yeah, you're right. So yeah, rather than being a consultant or CSP and working in that space, I'm internal IT. Always have been. Always, of course. As soon as I start talking, my phone rings. So yeah, always been in that internal space, but luckily in my role, I'm able to still be an MVP and do a lot of public contributions to things. So I'm MVP. I was an MVP in data center and cloud, and now I'm in Office apps and services. It's really everything under the M365 umbrella is the general focus, which is a rather big umbrella. Yeah, and I do a few blogging, other bits and pieces. So yeah, I think I hopefully bring to the table that different view of the beginning to end ownership of things and knowing the pain of change.
As opposed to the people who bring the pain. You have to.
We just we just come in, we dump it, and then we run away, right?
And we pay you to bring the pain. So
yeah, exactly.
What does it say about us?
Quite a lot.
Yeah. Okay, so we're kind of sticking to one topic today, but it's a fairly broad topic overall, and it's really just based on a lot of the changes that we've had close to a year now to sit back and take a look at what's changed in terms of the way we approach things like remote work, etc. But a lot of the time, the focus has all been on, getting people to use Teams or this or that. But I was thinking in terms of the things that I really haven't seen too many people go into too much detail around. Like there's always like guidance, etc. But I haven't actually heard too many people sort of put their hand up and talk about the impact that this has had on your traditional IT management or traditional type management of client devices. So we've got this weird situation that I'll just sort of jump into the next slide for it, where we had to sort of get a lot of people to roll out a lot of technologies that were quite new. And in this case, we couldn't actually be there for a lot of the kind of like on-prem handovers and walkthroughs, et cetera, that we'd normally be involved with. So a lot of the things that we go, look, this is fairly risky, but I'm going to be on-prem with you for the next 5 days. So whatever we need to do, we can sort of knock it all out and get it dealt with. But all of a sudden, we were rolling out more changes to more people in a shorter time frame without that ability to actually support them. So I guess then because this is like a fairly open roundtable conversation, it's not just the three of us that this is for. Like those of you who've also joined us, please jump in as needed. Whether if you want to unmute to jump in where you want to, please do that. If you're a little bit microphone shy, or maybe you think it might be a bit too noisy where you are, definitely just dump some things into the chat window. I'm looking at the chat window. Oh, we've got some interesting people joining, some people that I don't think have joined us previously.
Oh, Mr. Adam Gross.
Yeah, that's
the one and only.
Yeah, we've got two Adams today. Maybe Adam's upset that he's not the Adam that we invited.
I'll step aside for the other Adam. That's fine.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Okay. Well, even though, so I think Adam actually, one of the people that probably won't be able to join until a bit later, Adam Gross can probably substitute to some degree on that side, because one of the people that we were hoping could be here was someone who does deal with I don't want to say the largest configuration manager environment in the world, but I think we can probably say it is the largest config manager environment in the world, if not the world, in the Southern Hemisphere at least. I can say that. I can say that with confidence. There's not much competition really. No, but it's a big environment. So I think he'll be able to join us a little bit later. So I guess as we go through a lot of the things, the talking points that we've got as we go through some of the conversation, there is going to be a lot of overlap. So by the time we work our way through a few of the topics, there's probably stuff that we kind of addressed to a degree, but if you think you've got something else to chime in and contribute, please feel free to do so. So I guess just in terms of these conflicting goals, I guess I'll just sort of ask you first of all, Adam. I'll call you Adam F. How's Adam F and sure. Adam G? You need an Adam H to keep it consistent. Is this something that you felt the pressure around that?
Yeah, I mean it's funny. You sort of have to cast your mind almost back to a year ago now, when at this time last year you're getting murmurings of problems and what might happen and worst case scenarios, and people thinking about BCP and DR plans and what if the entire workforce goes home tomorrow? What are you going to do? Mm-hmm. I mean, personally, we were in a pretty good position because we'd always been very flexible. So I think a lot of IT departments that had a flexible approach in the first place were probably a lot better positioned and used to dynamically swapping around to different scenarios and requirements, where the more rigid ones, and not saying that's because the IT department's fault, but it could be, but also could be just the way the business worked or for security reasons or other, drivers. There were definitely others out there that were much less flexible and probably nowhere near ready, even considering how everyone's going to take their desktop home, and there's no remote access whatsoever. So what do you do?
So did you already have Teams deployed, or not just deployed, but were people using Teams or at least Skype for Business or anything at that point?
Yeah, Skype for Business. So Teams was sort of very slow drip feed rollout. We were trying to use it when requirements came up for a slow, gradual expansion to the company, which was going well, but there was no self-push. But the immense amount of web conferences on all different platforms sort of drove Teams. The Teams was just a better experience than Skype for Business. Skype for Business was still okay, and running on premises, from 2015, it's still 5 years old, with not really any new features. There was no negatives on the Team side. It had everything Skype for Business had and more.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I wasn't sure if you were using. Yeah, because I knew that you were using a lot of on-prem stuff, and I wasn't sure if Skype was still one of those. So okay.
Yep, completely on-prem. Gateways on-prem and everything. But the one thing we couldn't get out of Teams from day one by running meetings through it was the dial-in number. So we had to jump through a fair few hoops and hurdles to try and work out how to get a calling number going when it's not your phone system. That took a month or so of pushing everyone until I finally got that sorted. But once that was done, it was feature parity with Skype in every single way that Skype we cared about, and had more stuff. Easy recording. Skype for Business recording is an absolute pain.
Yeah.
You have to wait for your meeting to end, and then let the computer process the video for an hour or so, and hope that it didn't crash anyway, because you lost a whole lot of them. Where Teams, you just click a button, a few seconds later it's recording. A few seconds later it's done. And even better that it's moving from Stream to OneDrive for Business. For external sharing purposes. So yeah.
Okay. Now I guess then for you or anyone else who's on here, did anyone hit any issues where you were rolling things out and it did turn into a support nightmare for you, just because of the rate, like almost sort of being unprepared to push out these changes at the scale that you may have needed to do it?
I would say, while people think about that, anything that had a physical component is tricky. we were thinking about rolling out, moving to Teams for our phone system. That wasn't even the consideration when this year's like we can't. We don't have staff everywhere. There's people, like IT staff where there's people, so it's just gonna have to wait. And I can imagine some people in some much worse places going, we can't. What are you supposed to do if you can't physically get there?
Yeah, I know personally. I found that a lot of the clients that we were working with over the last 12 months, one of the biggest things for them was there was an assumption that their VPN infrastructure was reliable until they needed to use it at scale. And I'm fairly confident to say that I spent 12 months improving and installing VPNs for different orgs around the country that, they'd already gone down the garden path of Office 365 and all that cloud productivity suite. But when it came to just needing access to file servers, and that became much too large a process to migrate into SharePoint, having that VPN working was the most important thing. And as soon as they had more than 20 people on it, would fall over.
Was that a limitation of like their bandwidth to the site, or
Yeah, we had bandwidth issues, we had licensing issues, we had just things that had never really been thought of. The infrastructure that was hosting the VPN wasn't up to scratch. Like, you name it, there was a problem that we ran into. It was quite a fun experience for me because it wasn't my company. I didn't have to look after it. I just had to fix the thing.
And VPN, as Mark was saying at the start, VPN's very intrusive. You can't just change someone's VPN settings while they're working.
Exactly.
Well, you can.
Well,
you can.
Of course you can.
You can. Yeah.
You can also.
You shouldn't,
not,
but you can.
You can also not have a job. So
Yeah, exactly. You have that option.
Yeah. Okay. So some of this, I guess one of the things that kind of will carry through to a few of the things that I've called out later on is this, issues, things that we're doing that are potentially going to impact the device. But before we get into that, let's jump into, I guess some of this starts tying into kind of related to some of the things Ben was just talking about, but just the whole concept of just people working from environments that weren't under your control. And you had no idea what was going on. You didn't know who else was doing what from home during those hours of the day. So the kids starting to watch Netflix in different rooms, and all of a sudden your audio quality goes to crap. So I guess just in terms of some of the things that anyone may have had some firsthand experience with here, what were some of the things that wouldn't normally be part of your remit that all of a sudden became things that you at least had to pretend you cared about, but you actually did need to pay attention to? What were, like, out of this list, are any of these things falling into that category? Okay, so Adam's been typing for a long time, so I thought he might have a few things. So looking at Adam's one, I'm guessing because I'm not quite sure what time it is over there, Adam, but I'm guessing you probably don't want to get out of bed and jump on a microphone. But so things like moving over to split tunnel, basically more needed than ever. There's a few things that we've got coming up in, actually the next slide sort of starts highlighting some of the things that are going to have a big impact on that. Eddie's comment around, the VPN is down, but it's like, no, it's your internet connection. So even for me, like, I've got this weird thing with my network at home that if I reset too many autopilot VMs within a short time period, my internet connection drops, and I can do it consistently. So now I've basically had to, for my lab VMs for that stuff, I've had to set up a secondary connection that's just like a 4G dongle that is doing all of that. So so that's something that I've had to deal with firsthand. And I know I've got something misconfigured when my wife asks, "Are you downloading something?" I know that when I get those magic words, that it's like, oh crap, the server's connected to I'm basically pointing the VMs to the wrong neck. So I guess out of these things, what are some of the ones that, I guess, maybe not the ones where you've just been able to shrug your shoulders and say, not my problem? What are the things you've actually had to deal with on this list?
while people are thinking, I think at the start of the pandemic, people had this expectation that IT should just know it all and sort it out.
Yeah.
But I think the reality hit after a while, and 4 or 5 months into it, people are realizing how much both IT does generally, and that they aren't in control of every single scenario, and you can't just call them going, it's slow.
Yeah.
And you go, what sort of internet have you got? I don't know. There's a box. Like go through those conversations. One little tiny troubleshooting story is I had someone call slow internet. First thing you break out is speed test just to get a gauge of what's going on. Had really, really poor speeds. Had a look at their Wi-Fi signal, all good. So found out they were hotspotting to their mobile phone, and the mobile phone had 1 bar of reception.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, might sound silly in this day and age still, but you can still walk around your house and probably find a better spot for your signal. So they went off and did that, came back and said, I found the spot, and now I've got 3 bars, and it looks really good, but it's still really slow from a computer. It's actually worse. So go back to them, log on, have a look. Now they've got 1 Wi-Fi bar on their computer because they just took the phone a long, long way from where the computer was and just moved the problem, right? So, yeah, lots of those stories I'm sure everyone has.
Yeah. So I've got a good one.
Ben's good,
I've got my partner behind me on a call as well, so I'll be quick. One of the large telcos in Australia, who will remain nameless, seems to have a consumer grade NAT set up on their mobile internet, which was causing problems when people would hotspot, because they then could not, the VPNs would not work because the pass-through stuff just wasn't working, and it just failed. So one of the things that one of my clients had to do was, the first time, as soon as someone would call up and say my VPN isn't connecting, or it's connecting but I can't access anything, the first thing they would need to ask is, what is your personal mobile phone carrier? Like, who do you have your mobile with? And if it was this one specific one, you'd be like, well, you can't use that. Which then, had that conversation. Well, okay, so I need access to the internet. How do I do this? And obviously, the selfish response would be, we'll just go get better home internet, but you can't say that. And you can't tell the end user that they need to change their personal phone provider. So then what's the question? You need to deal with a procurement thing to get them a 4G dongle. It's just stuff like that. It was really, really threw people for a loop.
Now, I'm hoping that Adam really appreciates, not Adam F, Adam G. I hope you appreciate that I put LTE at the end of 3G, 4G, and 5G. So I've had to target this for an international audience. So
something Viacom.
Yeah. But otherwise, like, some of the things that I've had to see firsthand were orgs that just didn't allow their laptops that were just in the office all the time. Like, they were not allowed to connect to other Wi-Fi connections, or initially they weren't allowed to connect to non-work printers, etc. So I've had to see like a lot of environments where some of that stuff they've just had to open it up so that people can actually get their jobs done from home.
It is, sorry, just on that point though as well, it is still a concern, because you have to throw some security concerns out the window. It's, people would have originally, rightly or wrongly, blocked people adding printers. They couldn't just print a bunch of work stuff at home and then take it wherever they wanted to take it.
And to put on my my consultant hat that I no longer need to wear anymore, that's where I would suggest that moving to a fully zero trust networked cloud management solution gets you away from some of those security problems, because you don't have to worry about the security, because the device is brick walled off from your environment. I know it's a fanciful thing to say, but I've had success in convincing other people to drink the Kool-Aid that I continue to drink.
So how do you protect document leakage in that scenario from someone just printing a bunch of stuff wherever they want and doing what they want with it?
Printing is always going to be the biggest problem as far as any data loss prevention. If Steve was on here right now, I'm sure he'd be jumping up and down, because his biggest claim to his biggest constant refrain is, no one should have printers because that is against all security. And you go, okay, very good, very good. And then my other one is if you're concerned about security, don't have electricity running into your building because then you won't be able to power on your computer. So there is obviously always a certain level of what you can and can't control. But I mean, as far as allowing people to print to install printers and stuff, you don't give them admin to their machine, and that will invariably not allow them to install print drivers. So, that will stop them from being able to install printers that you don't deem as requirable.
Now, aren't there modern, over Wi-Fi, aren't there just generic drivers now for printers where you don't even need the manufacturer?
Sometimes yes. I'm not going to go down the route of knowing everything about printers. I don't. But yes, quite a lot of printer manufacturers utilize the generic printers. I think it's like the generic PCL6 printer driver. But if they're getting any kind of multi-function printer, they generally have their own proprietary driver.
Yeah. So the catches I see are a lot of cheap, crappy printers at home that, even the ones that you've heard the names of, their consumer models are usually terrible.
Yep.
And as Ben said, you won't get the other features like scanning. Some of them will use the inbuilt scanning stuff in Windows will recognize. So the printer you can send this to a PC and it actually pops up on your PC using, I don't know which inbuilt program it is. Didn't even realize it was there until we started using it. But you can also have certain group policies that allow purely driver additions for printers, and that's it.
Yeah.
Which is a nice in between if you need to allow it, but don't want to allow admin access or log on to every single computer that when someone needs a printer and put the admin password in. That is a good middle ground.
And then even the other issue you've got with printers is it's not the fact that you can print. If you can save, as soon as you can save something locally or you can save it to a flash drive, you can just drop that into the printer anyway, and away you go.
The whole DLP discussion, if you can see it on your screen, haven't you already lost the data?
Yeah.
Microsoft released an app on your phone that you can point to a printed out spreadsheet and it'll convert it back into Excel for you.
Yeah.
Right.
As you said, if you can see it, it's basically lost. Is sort of the really tinfoil hat way of seeing security. It's funny. When I sort of looked into universal print quite a lot, one of the biggest things that I immediately thought was, if I'm not in the office, why do I need to print? This is obviously the consultant in me just not understanding that some industries just genuinely need to print things out. So it's definitely a problem. But then obviously there are like file security labeling that you can do sort of to track file movement, so that if they do leak, you can at least detect that stuff and get reported about it. And I guess at that point, really, it's more about reporting leakages rather than stopping them. If you know that data is going places that you don't necessarily want it to, you can track that down and try and stop it through more personable ways rather than IT.
Yeah, agree. It's all about
and also
logging.
A really successful approach is turning on the built-in Windows logging for it's not forensic or anything, but it gives basic idea of what's being printed, and you log it, and then you collect those logs, and the employees know that that's being collected.
Yep.
So.
Yep, definitely. If you think you're going to get caught, you're probably not going to do something dodgy, right? Like from the general mindset of people.
That is the theory, yeah.
If there's a bag of money lying in a field that no one's around, are you going to grab the bag of money, or are you going to just walk on and go, well, someone's left it there? It's yeah.
Okay, so the next slide, I think Scott has appeared just in time for this one, but if Scott hadn't turned up, or if Scott's not in a position to talk, I think Adam might have some input on some of these topics.
Yes.
Seeing that Adam just commented on one of them a few minutes ago. So I guess the first one is just kind of a natural transition away from pointing people to internal WSUS out to Windows Update for Business. That's kind of I guess to me, it's a no-brainer. It's not necessarily always a no-brainer in terms of what the what your internal reporting requirements, etc., are if you want to be tracking all of that stuff. So I think that one's kind of a straightforward one, especially for orgs that were already allowing you to fail over to Windows Update if you couldn't reach WSUS. So that one was kind of would be a fairly straightforward one in a lot of cases. But the next one, adoption or increased usage of cloud distribution points. Scott, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, well, firstly, in general, you probably don't need cloud distribution points. If you're going to use a CMG, then you just make it content enabled, which is different to a cloud distribution point. So a lot of people got that confused early on, and they would create both. But you don't actually need a cloud distribution point unless you're a really large org.
Yeah. So So I guess then in terms of like obviously not stuff that I expect you to know off the top of your head, but how much of a shift, or like how dramatic were the pattern changes that you saw over the year?
Specifically in regards to what? So another thing too, if you're talking about updates, like Windows updates in particular, then your content doesn't actually come from your cloud or from your CMG or your cloud DPs or anything anyway. It comes directly from the Microsoft Update service. So one of the things, like, so over the COVID years, we switched to CMGs for everything, just about 6 months before COVID kicked in. We were seeing some fantastic results. Then COVID happened, and the usage was perfectly fine. Like, it was totally seamless. So it wasn't, wouldn't even know anything had happened. And then, of course, everyone started doing work from home, and the networks implemented a VPN-less solution in Zscaler, which then redirected all the traffic back on-prem again. So our whole CMG and internet strategy pretty much just collapsed in a heap. So that was quite interesting.
So in terms of, do you get to see like what your actual Azure costs are around things like your CMGs?
Yeah, it's like cents. Even for us, I think last time we looked at it, was like whatever the cost of the, what is it, A1 or whatever the server is. So it's like $100 a month or something like that.
Yeah,
it's not even. It's like it's for an org our size, it's insignificant.
Yeah, because when the MEM team was sort of talking, when they were sort of doing some, I think they were breaking it down to like the cost per PC that they were managing, and it really was obviously they've got economies of scale, but it really was a cents per month to manage those devices that way. Yeah,
so there's like the footprint cost or the baseline cost of the VM to exist, which really isn't that much. As far as actual consumption, like consumption costs of the data egress, it's really not even something you're going to notice. When those costs go up, you've got to look at what the hell's going on generally. Yeah, I mean, the thing to keep in mind though, because with updates, like I said, the updates don't come from your distribution point; they come from Microsoft, so you don't pay for any of that data, or the only thing coming from your CMG is the client policies saying install these updates, and then everything else comes remote.
Okay, just checking. I can see that Adam G's got a bunch of stuff going on. So Adam's saying flipped everything to pull down from MS. Enabling connected cache. So okay, so some good stuff there. Thanks, Adam G. Have to be specific. Normally we don't have a single Adam. Today we've got two Adams. Now moving on to, I guess, some of the things that probably could potentially require a rethink based on what kind of network people are going to be connecting to from home, especially if they are connecting over 3G, 4G, or 5G, and there's a cost associated with it. Being aware of just how frequently things like, if you've signed up for the Windows Insider, what used to be fast ring, but now Dev Channel, like on average, that's like a build per week. That's going to be like 2.5 to 3 gig per week. A new machine, a new reinstall, etc. Now, inside your own network, probably not a big deal because you've got other things that handle it. You've probably got bandwidth. But have any of you had to rethink your approaches to Windows deployment rings and deployment channels. Has anyone had to make any changes there?
No, and I'm hoping it's the whole Windows management of drip feeding updates through based on the size of the pipe that people don't notice it. I know back in the day, you'd notice when something was downloading on Windows updates because it would just grab it as fast as it could, and there'd be claims bits was supposed to be doing something, but it didn't ever seem to. But these days, I've never ever had a complaint, and you've then got to the point of it being because of that update was getting pulled down, not through Windows updates anyway.
Yeah,
I've always had complaints about updates causing the problem or causing the bandwidth issues, but they've never actually been the issue. To be fair, I used to get it all the time. It was always Windows updates causing bandwidth problems, but it never was.
Yeah, and I guess now you've got so much more control. It's not just the times that you want things to be installed. It's also, at what times do you actually want the downloads to occur as well.
Oh, of course.
But then you've got the challenge is if machines are turned off during the hours that you want them to be updated, then all of a sudden that's something where you have to start prioritizing some of those things a bit more. Now, in terms of, future support requirements, for those of you who have got devices, and I guess this would probably apply to everyone, those of you who've got devices that you didn't deploy during autopilot, what percentage of those devices are now ready to go so that if you do reset them, that basically autopilot will walk the user through a simplified UBI? How many of you have gone through and basically just created like a catch-all group with a dynamic group or something like that? I was hoping, I thought Ben, so Ben is the person whose video I can see who I assumed would put his hand up for that. Yeah.
I mean, look, over the last couple of years, the majority of the work we've been doing has been greenfields. It hasn't been, sort of trying to do that hybrid to full cloud management, which has been really beneficial as far as success of the projects. But in saying that, it is very simple now from the endpoint manager to simply go in and tick flip a switch, and any devices that get hit by that immediately get converted into an autopilot device. So next time you hit that reset, it will go through and it'll hit UBI, and then it'll greet you at the autopilot stage. So it's not really a massive problem. It just requires a little bit of thinking about how you want to capture those devices. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so we've got a project that's just starting up now to do autopilot. It's going to be basically a big autopilot in tune and trying to be, internet-based devices.
Yep.
So there's probably going to be about, I don't know, maybe 50, 60,000 of those happening over the next few months. But as far as our existing fleet of config manager managed devices, they're probably never going to be turned over to autopilot. And largely because a lot of it isn't older devices, but also because the autopilot process kind of isn't really that seamless as you would like it to be. There's a lot of new features that you see coming in. They're talking about being able to run task sequences kicked off during the UBI and stuff like that, which, as all those kinds of things kick up, will probably make it a lot more usable. But at the moment, it's still a little bit iffy as how.
Yeah, so I think that the biggest sort of modality shift or way that you need to sort of change your mindset in regards to what autopilot is, as opposed to task sequences and standard operating environments, is actively trying to get away from the idea of having a managed operating environment or a standard operating environment, and not worrying at what point a thing happens, like our really, really strong and rigorous task sequencer. The idea is that the devices should be fairly plain. And this goes to the full zero trust networking. I don't really care about your device. I care about making sure the data is controlled and secure. Just making sure that your device is going to be on a version of Windows 10 that we deem appropriate. Your account will have the correct security. The applications that you need will be there, and we have the policies that need to go down. There kind of isn't anything else. Drivers don't factor into this scenario because almost everything I haven't had a driver conflict with a new device in the last at least 5 to 6 years. So that conversation can get shut down pretty quickly. But yeah, it's just the idea that task sequences don't necessarily need to be there if you're not managing the device as intently.
Now, I guess so. I just sort of saw. Yeah, I'm glad to see. Yeah, because I'm guessing, Scott, for you saying that you are going to be doing these new devices potentially as as pure AAD join, not hybrid. I'm guessing for you that's kind of for your org, that's kind of a big deal, especially considering the numbers. Now I know that you've been doing, no doubt there's been a bunch of testing, but that is really different to the way you would have, you've been doing things.
It is, but it's also a different focus. So this isn't going to be for corporate users. This will be for students and teachers, and it's serving a very specific group of people. So in this case, there's a big project that the government announced for the rural access gap. So it's basically trying to provide resources to regional areas, which actually creates quite an interesting challenge because they want it to all be internet based. And they're doing it to the devices which probably have the worst internet situation available. So the other thing we're doing is another project which is in-tune devices. So schools can bring devices in that are going to be in-tune enrolled. And they're not, and what will happen is they'll get enrolled in in-tune and the config manager agent will eventually come down, they'll join the domain, and they'll do all that sort of stuff in like a hybrid state. So that's a different piece of work. But we're also enabling the MCC for those devices. So because we've got the DPs at every school, the MCC can then serve those clients rather than having them all flooding out to the internet as well. This other thing with the regional devices, which is all autopilot, is going to be kind of interesting because we're not using any on-prem stuff yet that I know of.
Yeah, and I guess just a quick one for those of you who aren't sure. MCC is Microsoft Connected Cache. So it's what was temporarily called something quite excellent. It was called DOINC, the Delivery Optimized In-Network Cache.
It's still called DOINC. It's still called DOINC.
I can prove it. I've got a folder on my box that's called DOINC. So therefore, it's still DOINC.
They can't take that away from me.
Yeah. But it's your delivery. Pretty much anything that can get pushed down through delivery optimization can go through that, and that's something that, like, if just for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's basically your Win32 apps that you're pushing out, that you've packaged and pushed out through Intune. It's your Windows feature updates, your Office click to run files go through that. Whether it's fresh deployments, a lot of it will get pulled from there. Your monthly updates for Office.
I think the easiest way to explain it, Mark, is if it's in WAF or Windows Update for Business, or if it comes through Sidecar through Intune, it's going to go through the delivery optimization.
Yeah. So it's something that is it's a joy watching it work when you've got a lab environment and you're setting up a bunch of things. It just blows through them really quickly. Now, I guess just the final thing I wanted to talk about here was if anyone is actually doing, I'm not quite sure what to call a product that was called White Glove. So I've got the print symbol. I think that now means knee, or formerly known as. Is anyone using White Glove, especially considering that, like, by default, it's not going to be doing Windows updates. It's not going to be doing your feature updates or cumulative updates if needed. Like, how many of you are just sort of basically breaking the seal on the device to get it updated before resealing and using that instead of White Glove?
I've got a lot to talk about White Glove, or a lot to sort of ruin people's dreams about White Glove. So I think a lot of people think that White Glove is going to be their solution to not having task sequences. Or the idea that they're going to be able to pre-provision a device to 99% and then simply have the end users put their username and password in and it's going to be done for them. It's simply not the case. It primarily is there to pre-stage any applications or policies that are targeted to the device object and not the user object. And they also things that need to be run as system but not user. So the only real scenario that this is actually beneficial would potentially be in Scott's scenario, where you have areas that the devices would be being deployed to that have well-known issues with internet quality. So you don't want to have this device turn on, power up, and then they log in and then they have to download a couple of gig of data maybe, because their internet just won't be able to handle it. So really the only benefit of doing the pre-provisioning white glove stuff is if you know that your devices are going into one of those sort of gray areas, then at least you can pull down that software as long as it's been targeted to the device and not the user. Because if it's to the user, it's going to wait until the user's got a profile on the machine. It's pretty much that simple.
Okay, the scenario for us, so our stuff's all going to be basically delivered directly to the schools or to the users. There's not going to be a touch beforehand, simply because logistically it's impossible to do that. And if you're going to do that, you might as well just build the whole thing for them anyway. But of course, because everything is, you don't necessarily know which user is going to receive it, and we don't always get the devices in a state where we can pre-stage or pre-populate to be able to target stuff. So it's probably going to be all user-driven.
Yeah, and that's totally fine if you can sort of guarantee that your internet's going to be okay. One of the only things that I could ever sort of fault for the full cloud managed, user-driven sort of model of just having the end user experience all of the software going down is if you do it in large batches on a single internet connection. Just pulling down Office can kill the bandwidth. Even if you've got
doink it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, going back to what we were initially saying, one of the complexities of everyone working from home and all that sort of stuff, that kind of went away because you can just send it to someone at home and, it's going to be one or two people maybe with, hogging the bandwidth. But in a school scenario, if you send out 100, 200 machines and God forbid everyone decides to, open their laptop at exactly the same time and go through that process, and you don't have white glove or you haven't pre-provisioned some of the stuff, you can run into bandwidth problems, especially if you haven't done it previously so that the software is in your Doink environment or your MCC environment. That's just something to think about.
Yeah, and also probably just one other thing to sort of watch for with Doink is the recommendations that you might see around how much disk space, etc., to assign to it. I think some of the early guidance was like 20 gig or 30 gig. That is nowhere near enough because what happens is it does not gracefully expire content. It deletes it. It deletes everything and then starts fresh.
Right.
So, and that's a perfect lead in to the next slide. So a way to kill a Doink server on a regular basis with something like that is to use M365 for business or enterprise, sign up someone for Insider Fast. And notice here, I've said approximately weekly, but in this case, December and January as well, there were 6 new builds pushed out that month. Wow. So each of those like 2.5 gig in size approximately. So combine that with anything else you're pushing out. If you're doing things like, if it's something where you're giving people access to do, add their Microsoft account to the store app and things like that, and someone decides to download Gears of War, guess what? It goes through Doink. It will basically flush all of that stuff out. So it will all have to get pulled in again. Now, probably the good news with that though is only like 1 gig of flight sim goes through Doink. The rest of it gets pulled from AWS.
Wow. Okay.
But nobody said that. Or whoever the app developer was, all the geo data is not. It's basically getting pulled out from a completely different service. So while it would be great if Doink did do it, you'd be going, hang on, just how big would my Doink server need to be? Oh, yeah. So I just wanted to highlight with this one is that this is something that in an office environment, you're probably not really going to notice this, this kind of thing happening behind the scenes. But if someone's working from home and they've got, especially if they're over 3G, 4G, 5G, etc., this is something that's going to add up really, really quickly. So while the Office updates themselves are very, like I'd say, Office updates generally are pretty damn non-intrusive these days. Occasionally you might get that reminder that, hey, that a new feature has been added. But otherwise, that's probably not something you want to be doing to someone in a bandwidth constrained. Well, it's definitely not something you want to be doing. It's going to be problematic because it is not Delta updates. So all of the others are Delta updates. So pick and choose. I'm not going to sort of argue which one is better here. It's whichever one makes sense. But the one that kind of had the potential to be a big success, but I'm guessing people probably haven't really looked at it too closely, is Monthly Enterprise Channel, because it was introduced in May. Which kind of probably not a good time for organizations to say, oh, yes, we'd like to switch the servicing channel of Office in the middle of everything else. So has anyone actually so I guess here in terms of who would switch to Monthly Enterprise, my guess is it's probably most likely people who were previously running monthly and didn't like the fact that monthly was actually potentially a couple of times a monthly. Whereas Monthly Enterprise is good old, second US Tuesday of each month. So has anyone actually moved across to Monthly Enterprise channel just for the predictability?
Internally at my previous company, we did, and I recommended it to most of our clients as well. Just as you said, just to get that reliability that you knew when it was going to come out.
Yeah, and the Delta updates of, like, when you're going month to month, the Delta updates that give you the feature updates and the security, reliability, whatever updates, like you're talking like tens of megs per month, as opposed to once you start getting into semi-annual, then I actually view that this is actually going to be more intrusive than the half-yearly updates are going to be more intrusive than those. But even realistically though, because pretty much all my machines are running beta channel, even with that full reinstall, that process where eventually it says you need to restart Office, that takes like 60 seconds at most. So it's not like, and that's just if you're forcing it. Like if you're just sort of shutting things down, restarting your machine, you're not even going to notice that because it's just doing as much as it possibly can behind the scenes. Now, just a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about here, just kind of as a bit of a warning around if you do decide to start changing the channels that you've got users in here. If you decide that you want to move someone from monthly to Monthly Enterprise, or from monthly to half or to semi-annual, or vice versa, as soon as you start stepping or moving outside of the families, it's basically going to be a full reinstall. So it's not just going to do a Delta update to go, oh, hang on, and just let me sort of flick over so I can show you this. It's kind of easy here. So just to sort of prove that it's still called Doink, I've got a server. So here's my Doink server. I did not come up with that name. It's called Doink. If we jump down into the Office files that are storing, so this is actually kind of handy to see how things work. So it will basically go through, and one of these I'm not allowed to click on. I'm not sure which one. Actually, let's just jump in. Actually, you won't know what you're looking at, so it's okay. Just pretend that if something here doesn't quite line up with dates you might see in public, just ignore that. But in this case, actually, this is the wrong server to show it on, because in this case, I think everything in this build is going to be some kind of insider or even pre-insider release. But you can see here the build number. We're going from the 13.5s. As you start putting more, deploying more channels, you'll start getting more of these folders appearing under this Office CDN folder. And basically, it's each of those different channels will have their own folder created. So you can kind of get a good idea of how the Office updates work. But what it means is that even with Doink, within that, you've got enough files cached in there so that if you're rolling back and forth within the same family, even if you need to revert back a few versions, first of all, there could be some DO cache on your own device, which means that there may not be any network traffic at all. But as soon as you're moving between families, just expect it may not always be the case, but just expect that it's going to be a full, if it's Office on its own, what's that? That's going to be like 1.6 to 2 gig. Or if it's Office with Project and Visio, that's going to be up around 2.5 gig. So just be careful flipping people between those families, which I don't really think people would be doing all that much. So Ben, your lead-bat thing, is that to Phil or?
Yeah, sorry. So Phil mentioned that Windows 10 potentially uses lead-bat to reduce bandwidth. So according to Wikipedia, it says they introduced support for it, and I'm curious to see whether there's any actual official release notes stating that that's what they're using.
It's part of it. So even over on the actually, I won't sort of jump into it, but even when you're going up and setting up Doink over on server, there's actually a checkbox in there for lead-bat to try to basically use whatever data or whatever bandwidth that's available there for it.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I guess so. Then the other benefit of Doink is Doink or just connected cache / delivery optimization. Even if you don't have any of the server infrastructure, there's a good as long as it won't work well when everyone's working remotely. If you need to deploy to a new device, they need to get the full 2 gig or whatever. But inside of the office, even just with peer-to-peer delivery optimization, you will see a ton of network activity in a good way as the devices feed each other, probably 90% of those Office installation files.
Yeah.
Now, something that might be close to somebody's heart here.
I was just about to eat something.
You knew what was coming, or
I did.
It perfectly.
Yeah.
So moving on to the topic of third-party apps, I think there might be at least one person on here who wants to talk about this, maybe based on things that they're doing with their new employer, for example.
Yeah, potentially. Okay, well, you got 2 dot points to guide me. I guess I can work with this. So I guess if we're moving away from the idea of third-party patching, which primarily exists for like driver management in WSUS, right? If you're in a WolfB environment, you don't really have third-party driver management. So let's move away from the concept of third-party in WolfB and WSUS completely. So right now, there is no real third-party patch management automation solution out of the box for Intune for those applications. So I have just started working at a company called Patch My PC that is kind of filling that gap. Where we've just got 300, close to 400 applications that we actively maintain for updates and that sort of stuff. And we actually created our own third-party library of those things that you can sort of sign into and automatically have those publish into your Intune environment or your config manager environment. So that's sort of at a glance what we do, and we do it pretty well, I'd like to say. But as far as the required versus available and featured apps, Mark, did you want to give me a little bit more information on that? So I can...
Yeah. So I guess the thing here, so this is sort of tying back to the whole taking bandwidth considerations in a home environment. So let's say we're using an example, let's say new PC, it's autopilot. If it's on-prem and we know we've got bandwidth, and especially if we know there's going to be benefits of DO, etc., it's like I'd be taking the approach of I don't care if you need it or not, you're getting it just in case.
Yep, totally.
So all of a sudden now we have to go, well, hang on, we need to start turning back rather than it's almost like I guess in some ways it's almost like a thick versus thin image kind of conversation where where now we're basically saying maybe we need to start stepping in some cases back towards more of a thin image approach in terms of what apps we're pushing out, and then just making sure that we're telling people if it's something that's needed, but not necessarily strictly part of your role, go into company portal, etc., and then access it there.
Completely. So this goes back to what we were talking about, or what I was constantly preaching about, because zero trust networking and Intune management is a cult, and I am a member of it. Is the idea that we need to get away from the idea of a standard operating environment with all of the applications that you could ever possibly need already on the machine. You need to pair that back to what are the core business applications, and realistically, for 90% of any organization, that's going to be the Office suite, some kind of browser, and a couple of core business applications like a CRM or whatever your business does. Outside of that, the idea of making every application required becomes difficult, primarily around that bandwidth issue. But with things like the company portal that we've now got access to in Config Manager and Intune, that we can simply make applications available to different groups based on security group, sort of ring fencing and all that sort of stuff. And the benefit of it now is that everyone's got a mobile phone. Everyone's got a mobile phone with a store on it. So everyone's used to now going onto a store to get an application that they need. So the learning curve to get people who would, happily put their hand up and say, I don't know anything about this computer, it's kind of gone, because everyone knows how to get an app from a store. So simply having the suite of approved applications made available to your end users means that they can then get what they need, and you can report on that. But then as far as patching goes, to sort of to toot my own horn, the company that we're working at has an ability for sort of new updates for those applications can go out. And what we actually do is we make the updates required to everyone. We recommend that you make them required to everyone. And what we have is a customized script that runs as a requirement check, so that if you say Mark doesn't have Chrome on your machine, we're still going to have that update as a required application to your machine. But when it goes down, it's going to run this script and it's going to detect that you don't have Chrome. Therefore, it's not required for you to download the media and install it. So that's how we sort of get around this idea of making sure the entire organization is patched, while also sort of pushing that mantra of the end user can manage what software is on their machine. We just make sure that if the software's there, it's going to be up to date. If that makes sense. Yeah. And then changes to rolling out non-security related updates. Is that kind of?
So let's just say that it's like let's say I'll use Adobe as an example, just because I've got so many different things that people use. Like with something like Acrobat, traditionally you'd be rolling out Acrobat updates on a very aggressive basis because of security requirements. But if they were doing updates that were just like, let's say they were doing monthly feature updates that weren't necessarily 0-day fixes, does the urgency of those kinds of updates start changing now when you maybe are starting to be a little bit more wary of changing too many things on the user's machines from these remote locations?
Yeah, that's entirely a business decision. If you were to sort of ask me, going down that route of, again, I'm a firm believer in zero trust networking, and I don't particularly care what the state of an end user's machine is, because it has no play on the core business networking or infrastructure. I don't particularly care whether the application that they're using is up to date, unless that update is a 0-day exploit fix or a CVE listed thing.
Yeah.
I don't particularly care. However, quite a lot of businesses still have that security mantra of everything needs to be up to date as soon as it's available. One of the great examples was Chrome. Just last week released an update that had a 0-day patch applied to it, and it needed to be out. Every single company needed it out, negative an hour ago. So, it's, as I said at the beginning, it really is dependent. With the ability to simply package those applications either manually or through a third-party solution like Patch My PC, it's the ability to do that is sort of it's very easy. You just need to define, sort of what risk you want to put your own users to, because obviously all updating is disruptive, and you just need to make a decision on sort of how many updates you want to push out.
Yeah. Now, I guess just a quick one before we move on to the next slide, unless other people want to jump in on this one. Next month, basically the day of next month's session is we get to hold an online wake for Internet Explorer. Oh, sorry, not the Internet Explorer, for Edge Classic or Edge Legacy.
Edge.
So
Legacy, Ledge.
Yeah. So more than likely we'll have someone from the Edge team jump on for that topic next month. So I might dress up as a priest and read it its last rites, but we'll treat it as an Irish wake. So that means we celebrate. We don't get upset. I don't think anyone really would, but it might mean that additional refreshing chilled beverages could be required. So I'm sure. So we don't really need to have a Y Edge conversation this month, because we are going to definitely get the Y Edge. We will be bombarded with Y Edge over the next month. Now, just back to the comments. Okay, good. Got some more familiar faces jumping in, or familiar names. I've forgotten what everyone looks like now. I've even forgotten what Steve looks like.
Yeah.
Does he have a beard, or does he not have a beard?
His beard is the Schrodinger's cat of beards.
Yeah. Now this is I guess the final official piece, because I know that Adam F's the only Adam who's left now. I think you've got to jump off pretty soon. But I guess the final thing that I just sort of wanted to cover off is one of the things that seemed to be getting a hell of a lot of airtime during the early days of the work from home side was people going, oh crap, we really need to start accelerating whatever strategy we had in place for moving away from our aging RDS or Citrix, whatever on-prem infrastructure, maybe whatever other hosting providers they were using. Was anyone involved in those types of projects?
Yeah.
Now I think it's fair to say WVD has taken off. People seem to know what it is.
Seems complicated though.
It seems complicated, but really, when you if you break it down, it's RDS without having to manage RDS. And if you put that value prop in front of anyone who's ever had to manage RDS, they're going to understand the value.
It's definitely the point we got to.
Yeah.
On RDS, it's a pain. It's an absolute pain to manage. As soon as the pandemic hit, we doubled the servers, just to be careful. We want to go WVD.
Did you hit any licensing issues anywhere? Did you have your licensing server complain at any point along the way?
No.
Oh, that's so that's finally been fixed. Having licensing servers that don't.
The old days of jumping on and deleting the last 90 days of records to kick it along.
Yeah.
Because they're all test accounts, and you had to remove the test accounts. So you were still,
So I guess then the other WVD question I've got then for people is, if you have gone down the WVD path, what are you using there? Is anyone, like, how many of you have been able to move towards the Win10 multi-session versus, I don't want to say a lift and shift of your existing infrastructure, but in some cases it almost ends up being fairly similar in terms of what you're actually providing. So has it been like just basically relocating RDS or actually moving over to Win10 multi-session?
So everything that I've done or did, with a big preface on did, was just setting up proof of concepts for orgs. I had a fair balance of looking at that sort of shared pool or the multi-user scenario, as well as just the single dedicated session hosts. The migration from existing RDS to single session host is quite simple, and kind of makes sense if you just in a pinch need to get it over the line. The shared device stuff is a little trickier, especially seeing as a lot of organizations will have their RDS set up in a way that their core applications are still plumbed into their infrastructure internally, and then the shared environments just add more complexity to that sort of networking side of things that makes things harder. But yeah, unfortunately, I never actually saw any through to fruition. I do know one of our clients actually had Microsoft come in and just do a lift and shift of their RDS environment over to WVD, and it worked really well. They were still just validating it, but like it very much is in production, and no one noticed a change. So,
I think one of the big selling points, well, the two I can think of, because we assessed it, we want to go WVD was having at the time. Your licensing, like everything's already covered. You just pay for your compute, I believe, and that's it.
Yeah.
So it's quite attractive that way. And just the user experience. If you've got RDS, you might have a Windows theme or something scraped across it to make it look like a Windows client OS, but
it's
you're actually proper Windows 10. You don't have as many of those weird differences. So, and as Ben really pointed out, just the management of RDS is such a pain, having to bring down servers and wait for users to log off and then patch that one, then bring it back up and cycle that across every single server. It's just such a time sink. And it doesn't matter how many users you got. You're going to probably have one user in every box if you've got a box. So yeah,
like who would think that platform as a service offerings offer some benefits?
Yeah,
but I guess this is
who would think that Microsoft knows how to look after Microsoft devices and virtual machines.
Yeah, but they're the ones that got us into this state in the first place.
They are,
okay. But I guess this is a good example though, where like a lot of the time, like if you're sort of talking traditionally to, like, let's just sort of lump everyone into a single bucket and say traditional IT people, it's been fairly hard to have a PaaS conversation, because as soon as if you mention something like Azure SQL or whatever, they'd be like, oh, I don't deal with SQL, the database guy does. But once you start talking about WVD, RDS generally is something they've had some kind of exposure to. So all of a sudden they start seeing, some of the reasons why IaaS isn't the only option that they've got with the skill set that they've got.
Yep, fair point.
So I heard a rumor that I'm just looking at the comments here about Citrix, and I heard a rumor that Citrix has been playing around with using the WVD APIs and sort of putting a front end, but it's not actually Citrix. It's just a front end that interacts with WVD. So they're providing that service, but it's nothing but WVD, which is funny because the idea here is that it's such a robust solution already that third-party vendors can come in and skin it and call it their own thing, and that you don't particularly need to know what it is. It just works, and you never need to think about how it works. I think that's a huge benefit.
And that's generally one of the driving factors for moving anything to the cloud. If you've got a box there that you don't really understand what it does or why, you just know the output it does and provides a interface to users for something, what benefit do you get out of managing it end to end?
Yeah, exactly.
You want that to be someone else's problem, someone that should be able to do it better than you, because you don't want to spend days and days trying to understand this vendor's solution.
Yep, that's it. I honestly, I think the only remaining complexity for WVD is the networking element, right? Especially if you have core business applications that need to be on-prem somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, so that was really just, I guess, the main part of the content, because I didn't really want it. I think we've already sort of gone longer than Adam committed to me. So thanks for hanging around for this session, Adam. Now, this is, I guess, where we sort of will just sort of go into our usual any random topics that people want to cover that weren't sort of on the agenda. But I guess before we do start sort of, some people do start splitting off. Is there anything around some of the concepts or the pieces we've spoken about that there were areas that you thought we might talk about that we didn't, that you just want us to spend a bit more time on? If anyone's got anything in particular, just unmute and ask, or just drop a question into the chat window.
we didn't talk about Windows Update for Business because I can't call it WAFB or whatever.
It's WFB.
I can't do it.
That's fine. It's WFB.
But I mean, we migrated across to it, and it was great. It's there. I couldn't find a reason not to do it. It's
it just works, right?
Yep, and you put your users into different. Sorry, your users in different rings, so you can have IT updating straight away, pilot group a few days later, the rest of the company 7 days, or whatever your policy is for how frequently you want to do updates.
Yep.
My only slight thing is making sure you've got PowerShell ready to undo an update if required.
For sure.
Haven't hit that yet. But
yeah.
Reporting is an interesting one for Windows Update for Business, as Eddie pointed out. There was 3 different areas I could find reporting on, and the best was actually in Azure under compliance. I think it's compliance management section. And I got caught out trying to work out why computers weren't updating. So I had some computers in like 1909, trying to work out why they're not going to 2004, 2004. And there was a soft hold in place because by default, soft hold is on. So if Microsoft are aware of any issue in the upgrade process, they'll hold those updates for you. But it's not really visible. You just check for updates and you get nothing.
Correct. Adam G, who's not here anymore, has actually got a module that he's published to the PowerShell gallery that will allow you to jump onto any of those machines that are in a soft hold state, run this script, and it will tell you specifically what is stopping you from getting that update. It's actually really handy.
Yeah, because the other way, through Azure, you have to get the report, find the error codes, look up the error codes, and then go, oh, this is being held because of a contextant driver.
Exactly. The obvious solution there, Adam, is to simply set the computer on fire and start fresh.
Yeah, well, that's not a terrible plan. Just build it straight to 2004 from scratch. Yep.
Exactly.
So I guess my point there was, if you are on WSUS, it's definitely worth looking at Windows Update for Business. It's not a difficult change.
Yeah.
It's probably easier than what you're expecting it to be.
And just think, you'll never have to think about WSUS ever again.
Apart from maybe your servers. But.
Well. No. You can do update management on your servers through Azure. You can if you have the right mindset and a willing business, you can get away from WSUS completely.
I look forward to that journey.
It's a pretty easy one.
I think we're giving Adam a to-do list here.
The Intune itself is like a giant dot that I've barely touched. Apart from mobile device management itself, it's doing nothing in the PC space yet. Just the benefits that I see for how we work aren't there yet to go through the entire pain of moving everything across to it. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen at some stage for sure, and it'll be good.
Definitely.
But not yet. It'll be interesting. And actually, just one other point, we also we image everything ourselves from scratch. Lawyers earn too much money to be bothered doing anything themselves that's not earning the money. So financially, it makes no sense to have them doing anything.
Exactly. The hours that they're not lawyering is wasted money, right?
Yeah, and that's not being silly in any sense. It makes financial sense. Yeah,
it does. So, Daniel has something to say.
So what is your experience using Windows Update for Business for feature updates? Because, traditionally with SECM and stuff, I mean, you have to have tons of validation, tons of prep work. You have to, update drivers and stuff, and Microsoft doesn't do any of that for you.
Correct.
So how do they expect Windows Update to do feature updates when it just doesn't handle all that other stuff?
It kind of works on the idea that the majority of your devices will probably get updated, and the smaller ones might need some massaging. So it sort of goes back down to that what I was stating with Adam's module. There are ways that you can identify what the problems are. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be at the moment Microsoft's focus to make that reporting easier for anyone. So it's kind of up to us as the IT department to try and identify what's causing those blockages and fix them. Yeah, there's nothing nice I can tell you.
But you can control it though. Sorry, you can put a policy in place going, I only want to go up to 2004.
Yes.
Nothing beyond that until I'm ready. And then you can, once you're ready, change that policy on certain computers just so those ones go to the new feature update.
That's right.
So you still have that granularity of control.
And the other thing that probably like that you shouldn't overlook as well is when you are doing a feature update and something goes wrong, even from the really early days of Win 10 when it was still in beta, it did a really good job of going, we recognize that you've got a Sony Vaio, they are garbage. We are not going to install on them right now, because Sony was already basically not doing laptops at the time. So, but then basically those same machines eventually, they would take the update. So it would be things where it was basically baked into the installer that it would do that detection. So whether you were trying to load it off, boot it from Pixie, load it from a flash drive or whatever, there was all through Windows Update. You couldn't override their detection logic where they were saying, look, your machine's just going to be problematic. We're going to roll it back. And it doesn't. Do they still have the upgrade advisor kind of tool? I haven't really looked at it for ages, where that would spit that file out on your desktop to tell you what wasn't compatible.
So kind of, Mark. If it's not immediately available, like as in like it's not, this piece of software is causing that problem, or this piece of hardware, then so I've put a link up to Adam's blog about this because it was really, really cool work that he did. If it's not immediately obvious, it just goes, it's blocked. There's something blocking you from getting any further. The information is available, but it requires quite a lot of sort of digging through. Yeah, exactly. So again, I'm like I'm selling a thing. The module that Adam wrote will do that work for you. So if you're in a situation where a device just will not update, you can run this and it's going to tell you without a shadow of a doubt what is the problem. And the recommendation there is that you remove the offending driver, software, whatever, as opposed to the other option, which is bypass it because it's being blocked for a reason. So it's probably recommended that you remediate the blockage instead of just step around it.
Yeah, and if you think about the number of devices that, like even you having a slight delay on when you're pushing out semi-annual channel, if you think about the amount of time that consumers and other people who are just sort of letting Wolfbee push it out as soon as it's available, the number of in-place upgrades that are going to take place before it gets off, before you even consider offering it, that system, like there've been a few hiccups, but generally that works extremely well.
Yeah, completely. I guess one potential, or let me put it this way. If I was in a position where I was managing a large fleet of machines and we were pushing out a feature update, we left it for a month and then we looked at our compliance rating and we had, a percentage of machines that were no longer compliant because the feature update wasn't going on, and we identified that there was a common theme there. The two options are either identify exactly what that is and fix it on all those machines, or tie it into an opportunistic refresh of the hardware, so that you can rebuild operating systems, rebuild the machines, hand them out, get the old ones back, and just do it as part of that sort of process-driven thing where the end user gets a shiny new machine, so they're happy to take part, and you get your compliance rating higher.
Hey, thanks for your feedback.
All good.
Okay, just scanning to see. Looks like most of the questions or comments is the chat window is a self-service portal, apparently.
Exactly.
So I guess then, like any other topics before we either start wrapping up or going on a completely different unplanned direction.
So, Mark, I have a situation where we've got about 300 devices which are running a remote desktop, and we want to basically bring that down to the modern desktop. But we have this file share issue where the line of business apps require a file share, and just struggling with how do we deal with that.
So the thing, yeah, so when you've got, so one of the things you've got to watch out for if you're trying to move over to Azure AD or pure Azure AD without going down the hybrid AD path is if it's like an older line of business app and you've got, and basically it's trying to do things outside of the user context, that's where sometimes you'll find that they are things that you might need to go down the hybrid Azure AD joint path. So you can still, so even though, yeah, you could sort of do whatever combination of group policy or Intune management, in those cases, when you do have that line of business app, that's one of the things that like would generally be, or it depends on the app and how it's built, but that's one of the things that can end up being somewhat problematic. I can dig some stuff up on that one, Peter. I've got some, it's from a couple of years ago, but it's probably, it would still be all the same kind of things to watch out for. But if it's accessing things like file shares, if like as long as you're synchronizing your identity from on-prem into Azure AD, you should still be able to access on-prem file shares, but that doesn't necessarily, but if those line of business apps aren't using file shares, if they've got other services you're connecting to, that's where you're going to hit those issues.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, anything else? And if there isn't, I'd like to thank Adam for jumping in. I kind of put him on the spot and said, hey, how would you like to volunteer to do this? But I didn't do it yesterday. So yeah, that's something in my defense. I did give you a few days notice, and I told you did not have to do any prep work, which was, I think that's what pushed you over the edge.
That was the selling point. I can just turn up and talk about stuff. Awesome.
Yeah,
excellent.
Yep. No worries. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Yeah. I'll drop out now and leave the rest.
Well, I'll let you get back to your family.
Yep, I think they're hungry.
Yeah.
See you, Adam.
Hey, see ya.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, man, everyone. Bye.
We've got a frozen Adam. Oh,
We
no,
do.
He's gone now.
He's gone. There we go.
Okay, so I guess this is the bit where we stop the recording, but we keep conversation going. So if there's anything still related to the content that we just covered off, we'll keep it as part of the recording, but otherwise I'll stop the recording because sometimes I know there are topics that people want to raise that aren't necessarily things that you don't really want there being evidence of those conversations.
This
so
is the after hours. Yeah, this is the after hours support section of the user group.
To access the following video, please provide your Bitcoin details.